Today, I'm here at Chickamauga Battlefield in North Georgia. Yes, it's a Civil War site, but today I'm here to learn about World War I history through a ranger-guided tour. That's coming up next.
Everybody's in earshot now at least, so we'll kind of go on and officially get started. Don't worry, we won't sit out here too terribly long. I know there's no shade right here, and if it starts to get a little too blistering, we'll at least back up across the street and get in the shade there. So here on September 20th, 1863, we're kind of in the rear of the Union Army's line during the Battle of Chickamauga. The main kind of Union line is just on the other side of those woods behind you guys, kind of out along the Lafayette Road. And kind of this field, known as North and South Dyer Fields, after the Dyer family that lived in a house you can kind of make out the house through the trees there, a house in that location there, not that specific building. They had, at the time of the Civil War, kind of had one of the largest farms here on the battlefield. Well, at the time of the battle, the Union Army of the Cumberland, commander, his name is William Rosecrans, his headquarters is up on this ridge just behind us, kind of right amongst those little trees there. The angle we're at, we can't quite see the position marker telling us where that is. But then the ridge line that kind of stretches out across that field out there is also where a lot of Union artillery is positioned. So when the Union Army on the final day of the Battle of Chickamauga gets broken in half and is routed, that is taking place kind of across this field. So if we're standing here on September 20th, 1863, whoops, we would be seeing, appreciate it, thank you. Mental note to self, don't leave that sitting there, right? We would be seeing large numbers of men just running across this field. This field would be a scene of chaos in September of 1863. Today, it's a scene of kind of peaceful tranquility, right? To me, this is one of the most beautiful spots on the battlefield. You just come out here, and especially when the grass is a little high, the wind starts blowing, you get this nice waves going through. This is a popular place for bicyclists. We can see some cyclists coming through here. This is an absolutely just serene place. You come out here at sunrise or sunset, this field is full of deer. But if you were standing here 100 summers ago, in the summer of 1917, this would have been an incredibly chaotic place. That would have been chaotic for a very different reason than it was in 1863. Because we are standing in the middle of Camp Greenleaf. So welcome to Camp Greenleaf, everybody, right? So Camp Greenleaf, to kind of visualize this, if you can imagine where it's standing right here and looking out across this field in the summer of 1917 into early to mid 1918, as you look across this field, this whole field, kind of from this tree line right to my left, right behind me, stretching all the way across the road to the next field over. We'll drive by that next field when we get back in our cars in a few minutes. Just this whole field just being full of tents and barracks. This is one of the largest training depots in the Army during the First World War. And specifically what Camp Greenleaf is doing, this is the Army kind of medical corps training facility. Battlefield medics, hospital stewards, people who have associated or kind of similar jobs, so ambulance drivers, stretcher bearers, all of that is being trained here at Camp Greenleaf. So if you are a soldier on the front lines in France in the American Army and you get wounded and a medic comes and takes care of you, chances are that medic learned his task right here on this field in front of us. This was a massive facility, but it's also a facility that didn't necessarily leave a huge footprint. Most of Camp Greenleaf is in tents. So tents, thankfully, don't leave a big footprint. And then wooden structures. So basically just kind of held in place with kind of posts. So they're not necessarily pouring concrete foundations and doing things like that that would leave behind a major kind of landscape altering footprint. But this is definitely the hub, the heart of operations here 100 years ago. It's one of the quieter spots on the battlefield today, but 100 years ago, this is the busiest spot, right? When we get up to Snodgrass Hill, when we get up to the next stop, we've got a little kind of a mini museum set up for the weekend, and there's actually a couple of photographs of all the tents out in this field, and I'll make sure we go in there and we'll check those out before the formal program begins up there. But this place, to me, is indicative of everything that's important about World War I here on this battlefield, this field where we're at, for a couple of reasons. First is, you know, when we think of war, we think of people losing their lives, right? We think of combat, we think of people getting killed. But part of fighting a war is ensuring that people don't lose their lives. And that's what's going on out here. This is the lifesavers getting trained out here, which to me is really cool. It's really fascinating. They're also training large numbers of veterinarians. The Army at this point is still kind of in the transition point, going from horses to mechanized vehicles. So they have a large number of vets to care for the horses who are pulling the ambulances and the supply wagons and all that stuff. So the vets are being trained out here. So this really is kind of a place that, even though it's a battlefield where a lot of death took place in 1863, this is a place where a lot of lives get saved on the battlefields of France because of what happened right here behind me. And it's massive. So to kind of illustrate just how big this is and some of these buildings are, I'm gonna pull up from, very quickly and briefly, a little excerpt from if I can find where my bookmark is. There we go. This is from April of 1917 from the Chattanooga Times, and it talks about the buildings that they're going to put here. It says 81, this is from April 21st, 1917, 81 large frame buildings are to be erected in Chickamauga Park as quarters for 2,500 United States Army Reserve officers and applicants for Reserve Officers Commission. So they're specifically kind of starting to talk about Warden McLean, but it's going to spell out onto this a little bit. The War Department intends that the camp shall be ready May 1st and instruction begun May 8th. This news article is from April 21st. Gives you an idea of just how quickly they're ramping up. They run the article on April 21st. They want the camp ready by May 1st. They want people out here training on May 8th. That's a pretty quick turnaround. We don't do things that quick anymore. Therefore, much of the military city must be finished in 1 week, and all must be ready for full use in 2 weeks. Thus a unique proposition before Chattanooga building contractors. Never before have they been requested to bid upon an urgent rush order of such large proportion. There's a score of contractors here who would not consider the Reserve Officers Camp an extraordinary undertaking if they had 3 months to do the work. A dozen would not regard the project unusual if they had a month to do the work. But who can secure material and completely erect 81 large frame buildings in a substantial manner as the specifications provide by May 7th? Goes on and it kind of describes this. It says, list of camp buildings to be erected at once. Here are the buildings that must be immediately erected. 15 company barracks, 246 feet long in sections according to the ground. So 246 feet, that's almost the length of an American football field. That's 300 feet, so pretty big buildings. And they need 15 of those. We need 15 kitchens, 20 feet wide and 28 feet long. 15 mess halls, 84 feet long. 16 latrines, 35 feet long. That's a lot of latrines, y'all. Everybody knows what happens in a latrine, right? Okay. This wouldn't be as pleasant of a place to be standing. 1 administration building, 84 feet long. 1 hospital building, 126 feet long. 2 storehouses, 20 feet wide and 56 feet long. The camp equipment is expected to cost about $25,000. No tents will be used by the student officers, but a camp may be pitched conveniently near for the instructors for the regular Army. They're running this newspaper article as part of the advertisement to get contractors to come in and put in bids. So they're basically putting the ad out for bids on April 21st, and by May 8th they want the job done and people out here training. Absolutely astounding how quickly the United States mobilized from war. And so this field would have transformed literally overnight from this nice pretty green space to a bustle of activity. Very quickly, all of this green grass would have been trampled under feet and turned to mud and nastiness. There's a lot of latrines. There definitely would have been a lot of nastiness out here. All the horses that are out here, all the camps, this large number of people out here. By the end of the war, about 65,000 men trained at Chickamauga battlefield. That's about the same. That means that slightly more people trained here at Chickamauga battlefield during World War I than what the Union Army put into battle in September of 1863. That's pretty big. This is a massive undertaking. And that kind of brings us to kind of the big theme that I want to end with, at least at this stop. You put that many people in any given point, particularly in that era, and people are going to get sick, people are going to die, people are going to have, it's going to be suffering. Oftentimes people will say, well, I come up to the park when we start talking about World War I or the Spanish-American War, and they'll say, why are you guys talking about that? Y'all should only be talking about the Civil War. So the question I always like to ask people is, does the young doughboy who dies on this field in 1917 of typhoid fever or Spanish flu, is his sacrifice any less than the guy from the 42nd Indiana who dies on this field? Is it any more? Is it any less? You don't have to answer that. That's just a philosophical question to think about. But that brings us back to our friends the monuments and philosophical questions. At the start of the tour, I kind of told you guys that most of these monuments that are out here were put up as position markers, right? Just to tell you what unit is here on a given place at a given time. So we can look at this one and see 42nd Indiana Infantry, they're part of the 1st Brigade, 2nd Division, the 14th Corps. And they are in position here from September 19th, 6:30 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. on September 20th, 1863. This is where they camped, and then this particular unit ends up moving up to where the present-day Visitor Center is today, and they're involved in some of the fighting up there. That's kind of why this monument was here. Tell us who's here, why they're here, when are they here. If I were to propose removing this monument, what would the public reaction be? You're already making sounds. He's like, I don't know about that. If I were to propose damaging this monument, if I was to pull out a crowbar and a hammer right here, how many of you guys would like jump on me to stop me? Probably most of you would. I think you'd be on me, man. You wouldn't let me do that, would you? Today in the 21st century, we look at battlefield preservation and as we look at this place, you know, this is hallowed ground, and it is. This is a place where young men fought and died over the future of the nation. As President Lincoln kind of, you know, again famously said, government of the people, for the people, by the people, for the people, of the people, shall not perish from the earth. But this war, World War I, is supposed to be, at least in 1917, they believe this is going to be the war to end all wars. This is going to be the war that makes the world safe for democracy. And if the Civil War is a war fought over the future of the nation, if the Civil War is a war fought that reunites the United States and makes it a strong, unified country, if the Civil War is a war that is literally fought to ensure the freedom or extend freedom to 4 million people and define who gets to be an American citizen, World War I is doing all of that, but on a global scale, right? That's what it's supposed to be. And so thus sacrificing a place like this is in some regards, is in some ways, depending on how you think about it, a way of almost kind of honoring what happens out here. What better way to honor the guys who fought here than for this place to be somewhere that those ideals are prepared to be spread around the world. Kind of neat when you think about that. This is hallowed ground for what happened here in 1863, but this is a place that they're willing to sacrifice in 1917. They're willing to sacrifice it to dig trenches. They're willing to sacrifice it by even removing monuments and tablets. I know that's kind of a hot button news thing today, moving monuments. Every piece of metal in the national military parks, not only this one, but Gettysburg, all the national military parks, every piece of metal, like this little tablet right here that tells me what unit this is, was inventoried by the War Department and ranked and listed for removal during World War I. And it's not because we want to forget. It's not because we want to erase history. They did that because the stakes were that high. We were willing to pop tablets off of monuments like this, melt them down, make bullets, tanks, weapons, ammunition, you name it, and ship it off to fight in France. Now that's not something we would probably ever consider doing today, right? That's kind of the question. Would we? What does the world have to look like for us as Americans in 2017 to be willing to start taking these monuments here on this National Military Park down? What does the world have to look like for us to be willing to bulldoze this field? In 1917, they said they believed that that is just the price of ensuring that what they fought over is made permanent around the world. As it turns out, that's not necessarily how World War I played out. As those of you guys that know your World War II history, you know what's coming. But they don't know. We have the benefit of hindsight. They didn't know that, and so they're willing to destroy this place. They're willing to dig trenches. They're willing to pop tablets, remove tablets off the battlefield. They're willing to pop off pieces of metal and melt it down. This battlefield is also a place where, you know, if this is a battlefield where in 1863 we fight over the concepts of freedom, this battlefield is also a place where in 1917 people are kind of experience what freedom really means. One of those German prisoners of war who was here at Fort Oglethorpe in 1917 and 18 published a newspaper in the camp. And the newspaper still exists at the Chattanooga the Chattanooga Library. And I've got the translation, so my German is not real good. So when I hit the German words, y'all don't laugh at me too bad. But this is a bit from an essay that a guy wrote, a guy named Eric Posselt, who was a prisoner here. And he wrote this in 1918 from the internment camp here here in Fort Oglethorpe, and it's called In the Night. It says, restless shadows. As we look around, you can kind of visualize this. It says, restless shadows. The soldiers are wandering around the third outer barbed wire fence, and the observation post, the telephone shrills at frequent intervals. The searchlights spit their cruel, dazzling rays of light into the night and reach out for the shadows. In the huts, all are sleeping soundly. Here and there, somebody groans loudly. Somewhere, water is babbling. The stars are flashing with coyness and shame down onto the wealth of smooth roofs. On a far forbidden road, trains are rushing and bumping through the night. They are ugly and dirty, but nevertheless offer promise for the internees. Someone is standing at the barbed wire and staring across to the outside. He is standing there for a long time just staring, then he sighs thoughtfully and steals as if being oppressed by a heavy weight to his bed. The next night he's standing there again for a long time as he did yesterday and the day before yesterday. He is melancholy and filled with longing. He doesn't know why, he only knows that he wants to be free, or free again. And to me, that's kind of what this battlefield is, right? If you kind of imagine this battlefield, if it could talk, right? I think it would say kind of those same things. You know, it's looking out and it sees things changing over time, but at the end of the day, you know, this place, it kind of exhibits these ideals for which these guys fought in 1863. It exhibits the ideals for which the country was willing to sacrifice this place in 1917. So what we're going to do at this time is, because it's starting to get kind of hot. Everybody starting to get a little toasty out here? All right. We're going to get back in our cars where the air conditioner is mercifully on. And we're going to head up to Snodgrass Hill.